Good morning once again. This is Sunday. The weather's quite nice, bit breezy out there, but on the whole, not bad. Anyhow, I think the time has come to put another little anecdote up, or a little bit of perhaps my life. I'd have loved to have written a book through my life, but unfortunately I'm not clever enough to do that. So I can do it by little snippets of information, stuff that I remember. One thing I am grateful for, I seem to have quite a good memory. It's about the only thing I have got that's good. Unfortunately, being number blind, I have difficulty with dates and stuff like that. Anyhow, enough of me going on. What I was going to talk about today was a holiday. Well, it was several holidays, but the one I remember was of a trip to a camping site in Sussex. It was near Bognor, and the place was called, I believe it's still going, the campsite. I think it's been modernised a bit. That was at a place called Pagham, which was just outside of Bognor. And at the camp, I was called Church Farm. So it was Church Farm, Pagham. Now, to tie in with dates, as I said before, I'm no good at dates, but I do remember other things. On this trip, I went with a cousin, my father, I believe his brother. Several people went on this trip, and it was at the time when, if you remember, a song called Living Doll, that was very popular at the time, Living Doll. And my cousin more or less fed the jukebox picking up this tune. It was by Cliff Richard, I remember. So yeah, it was Living Doll. Anyhow, let's get back to where I was. The campsite was fairly primitive, I suppose you could say. But in that year, things weren't so modernised as perhaps now. I do remember we stayed in a caravan which was actually homemade. It was a homemade caravan. It was quite good. And I've got a pussycat come towards me. It was sort of a homemade caravan lit by gas mantles, and I think it was actually colour gas. There was no electricity on, so it was all by gas. So you cooked by gas. You lit the place up by gas. So yeah, that sort of gives an idea of the stuff available. There was on this campsite, which was also a lagoon. A lagoon was sort of connected to the same field as where we were based. Unfortunately, while I was there, someone drowned in the lagoon, which was a great pity. That'll probably tie in if anyone remembers that. It was obviously at the time quite a serious thing, but someone did drown there. My father, he had a little accident there. He had a trip. He was walking over, all right, the grounds there were not particularly even. Some of them were quite rugged. But anyhow, he was walking and he just stumbled. And unfortunately, it resulted in some years later his death. It caused thrombosis in the leg. And in those days, they didn't know too much about heart complaints, clotting, thrombosis. I don't even know if warfarin was available then. I don't think it was. So unfortunately, that's what killed him. Just a simple stumble. Stumble he probably got up from and said, "I'll blow it," and carried on. Well, that's what happened. Anyhow, this lagoon was quite a popular spot. It's obviously still there. The campsite is still there. I think it's still called Church Farm. I don't think homemade caravans are there still, but they were in the days that I was there. Also, what was remembered, and he normally turned up during food time, which was probably inappropriate. We had Dan, and he had a horse, and well, it was like a tank pulled along by a horse, and he would emptied out all the Elsons. Now, if you don't know what the Elsons were, they were a primitive form of outdoor loo, and they would obviously needed to be emptied periodically, and Dan would come around. I suppose they call him Dan the lavatory man. I don't know, but that's what he was known as, Dan. And those that remember it will probably remember it well. So that was that. And also, and I was reminded by an answer I had on one of my other videos concerning the 60s, collecting bottles. And it was obviously collecting bottles for what was on it, the deposit. In those days, lemonade bottles, R. Whites, Schweppes, Gould's, ginger beer, they used to charge 6p or so per bottle. So when you would empty the bottle, take it back to the store, and you got your money back. Well, funnily enough, I was all right, an inquisitive kid. I know I was. And the little shop which was associated with, well, it was in the actual camp. It was the camp shop, where you could buy veg and provisions. Okay, they weren't particularly cheap, but they were convenient. And they would sell little bottles of double cream. And double cream, they were marketed by, I think it was called the Chichester Dairies. But they would put on the bottles, I don't know whether it was a shilling or 6p deposit. So of course I was always on the watch or lookout in sort of ditches and that where people might have thrown these bottles. And I remember I picked up several which I got the money back on. So that was just a sideline. Also, so many things are coming back to me now. Remember, this was during the time of Living Dole. The Pagham, or Church Farm as it's called, had its own band. And if I remember rightly, they were sort of covered up with netting. They were sort of, it was to look like they were animals. They weren't, obviously, but they were sort of enclosed in like a sort of a cage arrangement, if I can remember. It was different in those days, and they were quite active, obviously. must have given the songs of the day, and they would play at night. Also, there was a very popular tipple, if you like, and it got people quite merry. It was also Church Farm. It was called Church Farm Vintage Cider, and it was supplied in stone bottles. You'd only have a small amount, I suppose a nip. It was just small. It was quite powerful stuff. Well, that was vintage cider. Anyhow, what else can I remember? Yeah, I remember taking little walks around there because you could walk to the seafront, and along the seafront was old train carriages had been converted into living quarters. I don't know if they're there still. Probably they're not, don't know. But what really interested me was there was, and this I don't think was a carriage, it was like, was a building along at the coast, right on the seafront. I think the name of it was Outspan, and the windows were full of cacti. They obviously liked the sea air, and they grew very well, and that fascinated me. A beautiful cacti growing, and yeah, that was on the front. Outspan, I think it was called. And my pussycat's meowing again. Hey, I don't know what's wrong with her today. She's doing a lot of meowing. She's a lovely cat. She's come to see me. I think she doesn't like the fact I'm on this rather than making a fuss of her. Yeah, that was called Outspan. And it was interesting to know that in that area, I think it was called Queen's Beach or King's Beach. That was also another part of the area. You had several pubs. I remember one was called the Bear. One was the Lamb. Obviously, I did not go to them. I think I was probably too young. And in those days, not that I'm a drinker now, I'm not. I do remember the names, the Bear, the Lamb. I think it was King's Beach Hotel. It was all within that area. Now it's probably completely changed. I do know it. The camp is still there. I think it is now owned by a larger group. But anyhow, that was Church Farm, and I'm trying to think of anything else that I could think of. I think I more or less covered it. They were enjoyable times. Yeah, I think that is it. So once again, I hope I've sort of brought up memories. This had to be, would it have been in the 60s? It was either late 50s or 60s. I know I was quite young. And as I say, Living Doll was the in song at the time. And my cousin Marjorie, she adored Cliff Richard and that song. I was playing it all the time. But definitely that's how I remember. So once again, thanks again. As I say, little snippets of information I'll try and put in. Try to make them not too long, but bring in all the salient points. One thing I do remember, you could have hired a battery radio. When I say a battery radio, this was one that used two batteries, a high voltage battery and a low voltage battery, were made by ever ready. They were enormous square boxes, and you could hire these to be used, obviously, in the caravan. Obviously, these sets are now an antique item. You may still pick them up at various radio shows. I don't know, but I know they were made by Ever Ready. They were valve, and they were supplied out. You had to pay a price, and you used it during the duration of your stay at the holiday camp. Remember that. Also, there was modern, well, at the time, modern caravans, and I noticed one was, I think, called a Bluebird Senator. In it was, at the time, a very modern TV. It was by Perdio. It was a portable, and they're quite a rare thing now. It's a portable TV, which I think was battery powered. I'm not too sure, but that's what they had a TV, which I suppose in those days was not very common. Anyhow, that's more or less all I've got to say on that. So, anyone else remember Church Farm? It was Church Farm, Pagham, which was near Bognor. And yeah, they were good days. So once again, thanks for listening, putting up with my perhaps long-winded chats. But at least it's put something down to remember. And that's what I say, I like to remember things. So once again, thanks. And my pussy's meowing. Thank you.